Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. Remember how amazing you were yesterday? Do you remember? So there's a radio program that I listen to, and when callers call in, they actually sign off with the caller by saying, "You look great." So if you could just turn to your neighbor and let them know how great they look today. You really do look great. Extra great because you're here on spring break. So this time I'm actually going to start off with some announcements before I introduce Stephanie. And if you could pull out your program, we do have just a few changes that I want to make sure don't confuse you. It's just during the 10 a.m. session today. So if you look at the 10 a.m. to 10:45 a.m. offerings on page 8. We've had to cancel the one that's in gray called Planning Ahead to Make Grading Easier, unfortunately. And so we'll actually move the tools and strategies, the one that's right under that, tools and strategies for engaging interactions between faculty and students in online courses. It says right now that it's in 9102. It's a very small room, so we're going to move it to 9101. Which is where the session we canceled is at. So it's all in the same building, and we'll put a sign there, but just to let you know, Planning Ahead to Make Grading Easier is not happening, but in that room, 9101, Tools and Strategies is going to happen. Does that work for everyone? Yes. Awesome. Also wanted to let you know that if you would like to recycle your badges, we really appreciate that. You can give them back where you checked in at lunch or any time today. And if you have been in this system for more than a year or two, I would be shocked if you do not already know a lot about this next woman who's coming up, Stephanie Delaney. Stephanie is the Dean for Academic Programs at South Seattle College, where she oversees all of the transfer programs. She teaches at the graduate and undergraduate level. She rides her bike from Green Lake to West Seattle for work. Not every day, but I think she wishes it was every day. She earned her PhD in educational leadership in higher education and distance education at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. If you go to visit her, she will ask you if you want tea, and then she will show you the plethora of offerings that you can choose from. She has a law degree from the University of San Diego School of Law, and she uses amazing technology with her announcements that she gives to all of her faculty, including the guide to Stephanie when she first came on board at South Seattle College. And I'm proud to say when I first came on board here at TCC, I stole it and made the guide to Analea. I like to steal lots of things from Stephanie. She also has her master's degree in environmental law from the Vermont Law School, and she earned her bachelor's of science at Georgetown University. I mentioned that she rides her bike because she is a triathlete. And if you've ever seen her at a conference where she's not presenting, what is she doing?
Knitting.
Yes, she is. See, we know you. And she lives in Seattle with her husband, son, and beautiful little kitty. No further ado, Stephanie Delaney.
Good morning, everybody. So good to see you. For all of you who I haven't seen for a while, it's delightful to be here. Today we're going to talk about managing difficult conversations in the online classroom. Our theme today and this week is Unite and coming together, which is sort of hard to do if you can't talk to each other. So that's sort of what we're going to be focusing on. All of the materials for this talk are online, and there's a live document that you can put some notes into. We'll be having some pauses periodically where you can talk to your neighbors, and I'd love it if you would put some of what you guys come up with at your tables into the live document, which is on there. So go ahead and go to that page, take notes so we can share them out. And unlike sort of your ordinary keynote, I will not be talking at you for the next 45 minutes. Instead, I'm going to hopefully just share some ideas with you and give you the opportunity to talk to each other so that when we all leave here today, you've got some actionable things that you can actually do in your classrooms or with your colleagues after you leave. So hopefully this will be a useful presentation. So, excuse me. There was a very recent Gallup poll where they polled students and asked about their thoughts about the First Amendment and their free speech rights. And 56% of those students said that they thought that protecting free speech is really, really important to our democracy as a whole and to protecting it. And 52% of them thought it was really important to promote a diverse and inclusive society. So these are good things. I love this. But 37% thought that it's sometimes okay to shut down speakers. So it's okay to speak out and protect free speech as long as you agree with me, is really what this is saying. And that we, those same students thought that the campus climate prevents people from speaking freely. That there's, it's not safe, actually, to speak your mind and to talk. And along those same lines, 29% of the people thought it was okay to prohibit offensive speech. So on one hand, you've got people wanting people to speak. On the other hand, you've got people only wanting people to speak as long as they're saying nice things. And sometimes in our classrooms, we have to say things that maybe aren't so nice. Sometimes we say things that we think are nice that other people think aren't so nice. And if we're going to have these types of conversations, we're going to need to learn how to have them civilly, because 57% of the students thought that all of the political and socially important conversations that were happening on campus were happening online. So if we don't know how to do this online, that's going to lead to some problems, which is what we've seen. Another finding from the study said that a lot of the students felt that the anonymity of the online environment was leading to an increase in hate speech. So we've got all of these findings from students, and it makes it just all the more pressing that we as educators do what we can to enable people to be able to have conversations with each other. So that is what we are going to talk about. Because I think if we can't do this, it's really unlikely that we will be able to unite. So I'm going to start by talking about some of the bad behavior that we can see in the online environment. And one of them is bullying. I'm not going to tell you what a bully is or what bullies do. I want you to just take really 1 minute to talk to people at your table to talk about what does bullying look like in your online classrooms. So 1 minute. I think I won't use the walk around. So I turned it off, I think.
Okay, that's fine. That's actually
we'll be sharing out on a couple of the future breakouts, but I feel like we probably all had the opportunity to speak, maybe even from experience, about what a bully looks like in the online classroom, and could probably identify it when we see it. And it can sometimes be hard to figure out how to respond. And so we'll be talking about some strategies. Another kind of mean person that one can see online is the person that engages in a microaggression. And I have a cute little video that's just like a minute and a half long that talks about what a microaggression is if you aren't familiar with it. And I will just warn people now that there is a smidge of profanity in this video.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins' name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Cut your hair.
multiple times a day,
So pretty.
Can I touch it,
hair?
please? Can I please?
is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares?
Just another angry black one.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
All right, so microaggressions happen in the online classroom too. Let's see, I gotta get back to slideshow. Is that me? Yes, all right, let's turn that off. Alrighty, so I want you to take a minute at your tables and talk about if you have seen and what it's looked like to see a microaggression in your online classroom. Again, just a minute or so at your tables. Let me bring you back together. So, bullies and microaggressors are two kinds of mean people that we can find online. Two types of behavior that we can find that we might want to do something about and that we need to come up with some strategies with. And so let's start talking about what we can do to help prevent those things from happening and how to move through it when it does, because it will. So the first strategy that I'm going to suggest is that we stop the conflict before it starts, which of course is easier said than done. The question is, how do we do that? And I'd like to posit that the thing that's important to do is to establish a culture of trust at the beginning of the class. Because when you've got trust between people, people are more likely to believe the best of the people around them, are less likely to take instant offense, are more willing to sort of say, you know, that's really hurtful, and hope that they won't be attacked in return because that trust has been established at the beginning of the class. There's a book, I don't know if you guys have had an opportunity to read it, called The Speed of Trust, from Stephen Covey Jr. And in that book, he talks about trust being actually like a commodity, a tangible thing that should be calculated when thinking about the costs of doing business. And he talks about a trust tax. When there's a lack of trust, the added expense in time and actual money when people don't trust each other. And then the trust dividend, the way that things can move more smoothly, the way things are so much better when trust does exist between people. And so they argue in the book that you shouldn't just think of trust as like a soft skill that nobody really needs to think about, it's not important, but that if you don't have trust, everything else is harder. And if you don't acknowledge that and do something about it, then problems are going to happen. So, excuse me, I just like to posit that starting off with trust, that establishing that trust and going through the efforts to establish it at the beginning of class are important. The question is, how do you do it? I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let you figure it out for yourself. I want you to find a buddy at your table, 2 or 3 people at a time, and just come up with some strategies about how you can establish some trust in the classroom at the beginning of a class. And this time I am going to have you guys share out at the end, and hopefully each table will have something different to share. So make sure you have a list of ideas to come up with at your tables, and then we'll have some strategies that we can all use in our classrooms to establish trust at the beginning. So this time, take about 3 or 4 minutes at your table to come up with a list of strategies you can use in your classroom to establish trust. table, one idea.
We thought because we were in the back, we wouldn't get picked. Our strategy just totally failed. So we were talking about how three of us are at the same college, and then we've got Erin here who's from Centralia. And we were talking about how we work with each other a lot and how that builds trust, just getting to know each other. And one of the big things was follow through, like following up on a conversation, just having that communication piece.
Love that, that's good. All right, somebody at this table, a strategy for establishing trust.
All right. Our colleague Tony here has a strategy where with her class they talk about they set norms for the classroom at the start, and so it's not, what I really like about that is it's not the instructor saying, here's what you're going to do for me or because I say so, but it's as a community we've decided what's appropriate, and therefore she was explaining the students are really good at self-policing and keeping each other in check, and she's there more to reaffirm that. But instead, it builds that community so that everyone's on the same page.
Thank you. How about this table? You guys have an idea?
We talked about building in transparency into our courses and not expecting students to blindly trust us, but to show them why we're doing things as we're doing them so that they know that we aren't leading them astray. And once they know that, then they'll be more likely to trust us.
How about you guys?
We talked about establishing a safe space, so in an online format, setting expectations and rules ahead of time, so it's clear what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to talk about and discuss. But it is a safe space, so feel free to share.
So we said two ideas. The first was setting up that social contract at the beginning of class, where you set the ground rules for how you're going to communicate with each other. And we talked a little bit about, some of us are not in what you would think of as traditionally, we're business and nutrition and science and so forth. So we're searching for the controversy. And one thing that I do in my classes with business students is, we'll pull up the news and look at it and say, okay, how do we make money? That can lead to controversial conversations. So it's in those cases, it's about setting a perspective and saying that you're looking at this on behalf of your business, not necessarily your own personal perspective. So there's kind of the sort of institutional mindset, and then there's the individual mindset. You keep those separate, and you set that perspective at the beginning, so that you're doing it not as your personal view, but as your view in a particular persona. So that can kind of help sometimes.
So, I won't go to every table, I think, because I'm going to run out of time, but I'll do two more. How about you guys?
We had the similar ideas back there, but one of the other ideas we had was having them post their picture, have their picture, so they have someone that they're really able to can actually see them instead of a symbol.
Okay, one more. Okay, I see somebody who wants to be called.
There's an overachiever in everything. One of the things I like about this group, and it's interesting, I've got business on one side of me and IT on the other, but they share personal stories, which I think is really impactful for students. So it's not just reading off a syllabus and saying, you're going to do this and not that. It's talking about things they've screwed up on and personal experiences. I think ties students better.
Thank you. Okay, so as I've been looking over people's shoulders, I see that the shared document is getting populated with lots of great ideas. So if you guys haven't gone to that, do go and look at the ideas that are there and continue to add to it. I think we'll have a really robust resource for ourselves at the end of the session. Let's see. So let's talk about some strategies for dealing with difficult people. Now, we all know that everybody in this room is nice. And we don't have to worry when we're just in amongst ourselves. There is no difficulty, but sadly we can't spend our lives ensconced with e-learning people, and we have to go out and intermingle with the rest of the world, which sometimes has us dealing with difficult people. And so I've got a couple of suggestions for strategies on how to deal with them when we're dealing with them in the online classroom. So the first thing is to assume the best intentions. And there's actually data out there that says that when we see something in print, we have a negativity bias. We believe the worst. When we see something written, we don't generally give people the benefit of the doubt. We think, that's bad. And if you think about it, anybody who's gotten student evaluations, there's 99% of them saying, you are the most fabulous instructor on the planet. Or the seminar you just did was the best thing I've ever heard. And then there's that one person that said, man, this was a drag. I didn't like that. She was mean. And that's the one you fixate on. The negativity bias. The only thing that really grabs your attention is the bad thing. And so we want to actually go through the effort to assume the best. When you think the worst, take a minute and step back from it and say, wait, is this a realistic way of looking at this? Or is there a better way to look at it? Can I be more neutral? I have a little story of a student complaint. That's one of the fun things about being a dean is you get lots of student complaints. And one of them was a student complaining that a teacher had thrown a pencil at her head. The student, so picture it, it's finals week, and it's an international student, and it's a science class. And so the student had been staying up quite late studying, and in the preparation, the teacher had a preparation period where people could ask questions, et cetera, and prep for the exam. And the student dozed off. Now the teacher believes that this meant that the student did not respect him, and as a result, threw a pencil at her head to wake her up. He thought this was fine, because the student should not have been asleep in his class. And if she didn't want to have pencils thrown at her head, she should have been awake. So, we won't go there. If we were assuming the best intentions, we would not believe that the student who was dropped off asleep is trying to show disrespect to the instructor. Instead, if we were assuming best intentions, we might assume, since it's finals week, that maybe the student was just tired. That actually didn't have anything to do with you as the teacher. So just one example of where if you'd immediately jump to the worst possible possibility, then you're not always going to get the best outcome. So not only assuming the best yourself, but encouraging others to maybe think twice about how they're interpreting things as well. You want to deal with the issue as quickly as possible. We all like to think, maybe that really horrible thing that I just saw happen didn't happen. Maybe it was actually something else. Maybe we're thinking the best. Maybe something really good was, no. Or we think if we wait for a little while, it'll take care of itself. Does this really happen? No. In fact, it actually just gets worse the longer you wait. Things that are bad tend to get worse if you don't deal with them. And then when you do deal with it, the difficult person will say, what? This has been bothering you for how long? Why didn't you say something sooner? You don't want to wait. You don't want to put it off. And if just nipping it in the bud while it's still relatively manageable is not motivation enough to do things sooner rather than later. Keep in mind that legal issues might arise, like Title IX issues that could arise if bullying and other things are happening in the online classroom and the instructor knows about it or the college knows about it and is not doing anything. So we need to nip the things in the bud. We don't want to wait. We need to deal with the difficult situations when they happen. So, how are we going to do that? I want you to, again, spend a few minutes at your table coming up with some strategies. When you find these difficult situations in the online classroom, what can you do to deal with them? Take a few minutes and then we'll share out as tables. observation that maybe there are other problems out there.
Hi there. I teach at Cascadia and also at UW and Western, and I find that my problem in online classes is that students often are just too nice and they won't disagree. Oh, I totally support what you said, these kinds of comments. So I believe that they do not know how to respectfully disagree with each other. And so we were talking about how Delaney might model some of that or how we get around that. So I just like somebody to make that same issue. It's sort of a Pacific Northwest culture thing, maybe? I don't know. We're too nice.
Thank you. How about this table over here? You have an idea?
All right. So, my strategy for dealing with difficult people. I mean, taught this topic multiple times. There's a constant tier of evaluations that you need to do. So as soon as there's a difficult situation, the first evaluation is, can I deal with this? Or do I need help? Or do I need to step away and go and get help? Because like in a face-to-face classroom, you can have physical problems, physical altercations, or somebody screaming at you. And online, we don't have that, but we're also teaching hybrid classes here. So can I deal with this, or do I need help? And sometimes you'll get questions online that may have to do with like religion, and you really don't want to misstep there, and so you might need to go, hold on a minute, let me sort myself out, let me bring someone in who can help, and then you can get your deans to support you, or whoever you need. So that's your first evaluation. And then your second evaluation has to do with, do I do this in the moment? Do I say, hold on a moment, I'm going to get the class started on an activity, and I will come back to you in an online discussion. Do you say, pause this thread, I would like to do some discussion and take it aside and have a side discussion with that student? Like, where are you going to do that? And so it's this constant level of evaluation of when and where you're going to have the conversation about this difficult situation.
I really like Alice's point about not feeling like you have to respond right away, right immediately. That sometimes taking a breath and taking a moment to think about it and figure out the best strategy for moving forward is super helpful. Other people with some good strategies for dealing with difficult people?
So we went back to the norming document that somebody talked about earlier, and sort of reminding people about the code of conduct that's been established in the class, that we're having a etiquette statement, something like that. And then if you need to, you see that disruptive behavior, you can refer them back to that document. But if it's something a little more extreme, such as hate speech that you're seeing, that would be sort of an immediate intervention that you want to do in an online discussion. Kill the thread, just like, or maybe pause it, block it. Talk to that person directly, whether it be by Skype or email or whatever you need to do. And then if you feel like that particular discussion thread can be resumed, then you do it. Or if not, then you move on.
Okay, I'm running out of time.
Good. So we've talked about how to deal with the difficult situations, and now we actually have to have those difficult conversations. We actually have to talk to the person and say, this isn't okay. And that can be the sort of thing that keeps you up at night, that gives you stomach aches, that just makes you cringe. You don't want to have those conversations, and that's why we put them off. And it just gets worse. So, what are some strategies for dealing with those particularly difficult conversations? I would recommend, even though we're talking here about dealing with these issues in the online classroom, that you don't write it down and write to someone and say, you are a bully. Or, did you realize that you were microaggressing against that person? That, as we mentioned earlier, with the negativity bias towards things that we see written down, just nothing good's going to happen when you start that conversation in writing. I would really recommend that instead you try to have it in person if possible. and we'll go there in just a second, but I want you to think about, if you think about the elements of communication, the tone of voice, and hand gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, all of those things are incredibly important when you're having a difficult conversation. The words are only one little piece of it, but when you reduce it to text, the words are all you have. Emoticons only go so far. So you want to have as many of those things in the conversation as possible. I'd recommend, ideally, meeting in person. With most of our students in our online classrooms, they are actually on campus as well, taking campus-based classes. So sometimes there are opportunities where you can meet with the student or students in person. We have some wonderful web conferencing tools available. We could use Zoom. If people don't have video cameras, you could use a conference call system, or just, a basic phone call. At least you can get tone of voice in there. But if you could get video too, where you can see people's faces, that really helps. The more of those various elements of communication that you can introduce into this difficult conversation, the better. Do keep in mind, though, the balance. If one person has video and the other person just has phone, it can make things not as good. So, if one person has video and the other person has phone, both people talk on the phone. And phone calls are a perfectly legitimate way to engage in this as well. You can hear long pauses, you can hear gasps of horror, you can hear people's voices go flat. And so I would just really recommend exercising communication options instead of just sending an email. Have an inquiring mind. Instead of saying, such and such says you're a bully, or I've seen this behavior that you've been doing online and it's clear to me that you're a bully. Instead say, I saw this behavior and I'm just curious, why did you do that? Or what were you trying to get at? Or it seems like something is wrong, and I wondered if we could talk a little bit about what that might be. Come into it with an inquiring mind and a questioning mind instead of an accusing mind. Instead of sort of deciding ahead of time that you know what it's going to be, like that student disrespects me as opposed to that student was tired. If you're asking questions, I noticed you dozed off from class. I was wondering, is everything okay? Well, then you find out maybe they're homeless and not disrespectful. So coming into it with an inquiring mind, asking questions instead of making accusations can be a way to enter into that difficult conversation, because sometimes we sort of build up a narrative in our heads of what we think has gone on, and that's not it at all. And so we're worried about a conversation that's actually an easy conversation, but we made it in our minds harder than it needed to be. So starting off with a question can often ease us into a conversation that's not as bad as we thought. Actually, having a difficult conversation is a skill that you can learn. Hooray! Because a lot of us don't come into this naturally. There's a couple of books that I would recommend, Crucial Conversations and Fierce Conversations. Both of these books look at it from a slightly different angle, but really actually have a framework and a strategy around how to create situations where difficult things don't have to happen, but given that difficult things do happen, or we often step into things that we didn't have a chance to set the groundwork for, how do you go in and have those difficult conversations in a way that is that will yield good outcomes? How do you do that? And they really give you some wonderful strategies. So I would totally recommend either of these books as you try to develop your thinking about this. The last thing I want to talk about really quick, because I have like 2 minutes, is self-care. Because a lot of engaging in these difficult conversations, experiencing these difficult situations, having to mediate between people who are unhappy with each other, having to try to discern where to insert yourself, this is all sort of stressful. And you need to take care of yourself and not take the stress onto yourself entirely. And so the last thing I want to talk about is just taking care of yourself. One of the ways you can do this is doing the worst first. You guys might have heard about the eat the frog idea. If you eat a frog first thing in the morning, everything else is going to look good for the rest of the day. And so if you just do the thing that you most don't want to do at the beginning of the day, that's one way to take care of yourself. And there's other research around doing hard things earlier in the morning. They tend to turn out better. So go have that difficult conversation right at the beginning of the day and get it over with. That's one way that you can engage in self-care, because otherwise you get more and more stressed out about it as the day goes on. Oh, first I'll answer my email. Well, first I'll just do this, and then I'll go, and oh, well, look, now it's the end of the day. I'll just start fresh tomorrow with this difficult. No, don't do that to yourself. Be nice to yourself. Just get it over with. So I was going to do a pair share, and let's just do 30 seconds. Everybody just exchange one nice thing that you do to engage in self-care. Just quickly with a neighbor. Okay, well, hopefully you guys were able to share just an idea or two about self-care, and please put your ideas about self-care onto our shared document so that we can all see them and indulge ourselves, because we deserve it, don't we? So I would like to posit that if we engage in some of the strategies that we've talked about today, in our dealings with our peers and our dealings with our students and our dealings even with our families, that at the end we can actually unite and come together with more peaceful and holistic online classrooms where people dare to disagree with each other and can do so in a civil and thoughtful way. I'm sorry that I used up all my time. If you guys have questions for me, I'm happy to take them here on the side, because I don't want to keep you from your break. Thank you very much for your attention today.